everybody. Sorry about that little switcheroo. Good night, everybody. We will start shortly. Not sure who's tuning in tonight, but as you can see, I'm at a new location. So if there's any problem with volume, please let me know, or if you can hear noise in the background, definitely tell me yes or no. A thumbs up if you can hear me. I'm not sure who's tuning in. Slowly but surely people are coming in. So thumbs up or a heart if you can hear me. Let's start off with that. Or a wave. Welcome everybody to my usual monthly talks. I realized when I was looking for my video from last month that I guess I didn't do a video in May, but I guess that was just because there was so much happening with the end of my program. For those who don't know, thanks Joe, I am back in Barbados, and so I am here to just do a few more weeks of therapy with my clients that I have here. And so definitely a lot more is happening, a lot more chances to practice more techniques. I have a new client, so that's really interesting. Really wish I could have more time with her because I definitely see some potential for her to grow. So really was hoping to spend a little more time with her, but it's not going to really work out too much, but we're just going to make the best of it. Anyway, let's get into the topic today. So today's topic is manipulation. So for those who don't really understand manipulation, I will try and make the examples as relative as possible. So a lot of people are exposed to manipulation, whether they're aware of it or not. Many times people are not aware of the manipulation that is happening around them or to them. So manipulation is basically someone or who's intending to basically change or alter or impact your views or your feelings about yourself or your feelings about others through basically verbal and in most cases verbal manipulation, emotional manipulation. And so there are many types of manipulation, and there's many occasions when people are manipulating persons, whether it be for their gain or their own self empowerment. I'm gonna take a lot of my examples are gonna be coming from my experience of manipulation through internship. And so because I work with a vulnerable population of persons, you see manipulation in these cases, and you really don't know you're being manipulated. Like, I didn't even know I was being manipulated a lot of times. And so manipulation can look like the simple things like lying or false truths or trying to confuse a situation with false truths, or they might be intending to get you on their side, so they will kind of twist the truth. A lot of times people who are manipulating will either try and kind of put you down or try to make you a lot of times question whether your reality is accurate. So a lot of times people who are trying to manipulate you for their own gain, they're going to try and discredit a lot of your realities. And so a lot of times they will attempt to make you feel that you're wrong in a clever way. People who are manipulative are quite clever, so they tend to have ways in which they will ask you something or tell you something, and they will knowingly, in most cases, know that their intention is to either confuse you or leave you wondering or leave you second guessing yourself. And so manipulation can be very powerful and very dangerous, because a lot of times people become vulnerable to manipulation when they're usually like really trusting. You can be a victim of manipulation by your partner, your mother, your father, your family. A lot of times people are manipulated by those who are closest to them, and that's the problem. If you find that you're being manipulated and, verbally abused, emotionally abused, it's very hard for you to trust other people, because manipulation usually happens when persons are pretty sure that they can get away with it. And they're pretty sure that they will be successful in getting you onto their side. And so a lot of times in abusive situations, you see manipulation being used to get the person who's the victim to comply, and or, for example, isolate themselves from people, because the person that you trust is telling you, oh, don't spend time with those people, or not even something as blatant as that. Like, they may make up a full lie and say, I don't really trust those persons, and maybe in the past this person has really good judgment, and so they will say things because they know they have good judgment. They'll say, they will say something like, well, I have good judgment of people, like, when have I ever led you astray? And so it's very interesting to see the different ways people will manipulate you and or attempt to manipulate you. And rightfully so, Senior Jerry Gavaya is saying, but if you are intelligent, you should not allow anyone to manipulate you. And that's pretty accurate. I mean, intelligence to what extent? Like, there's people who claim they're smart because, they have their PhD. They have people who claim they're smart because they got 21 CXEs. You can be intelligent or book smart, but at the same time, you haven't been exposed to people. So if your first relationship out of high school is a manipulative partner, you wouldn't know that that is manipulation, because it's done so subtly and so covertly. And people who manipulate and have a history of manipulation, it's not just something they wake up doing. They've practiced a lot on people. They've practiced on their families. They have been able to kind of gauge someone who will be vulnerable to the manipulation, or the false truths, or the trying to persuade you that your reality is not your own. And so definitely exposure, I think, more than intelligence, can definitely help in terms of keeping someone away from manipulating you, or reducing the likelihood that someone's going to manipulate you. But I think if you're not exposed to that, then you wouldn't really know how to counter or be able to gauge what the person is. On top of that, it's usually people you trust. So you trust this person to tell you the truth. You trust this person to have your best interest at heart, and they may not have that. Also, a point to make is that persons who manipulate others, it may not have been something they chose to do, if that is such a thing. A lot of times, for example, with my clients who have tried to manipulate me have done so and have gotten away with it because of my trust for the therapeutic alliance. So I trust my clients. My clients trust me. My clients know that I will believe them. They know that there's confidentiality. So in many cases, if they tell me a false truth, I'm not going to go to someone and be like, did so and so tell you? Because I'm just trying to make, sense of this situation. Because they know that's not what's going to happen. So I am left up to put the pieces together. And so that is what I've seen. But in the case of the clients that I've had, they have been battered, whether emotionally, mentally, physically. And what you see with persons who have been abused is that because they have been manipulated, they have learned how to play the game. And that is something that is quite interesting to recognize. There are people who have learned to manipulate people as almost a survival tactic, in the sense of, okay, if he's going to try and manipulate me, I'm going to be smarter and outsmart him, which is kind of what, Jerry, you're seeing. This is assuming that the other person is somehow smarter than you. A lot of times people are, these clients of mine at least, they are lying, rightfully so. They're lying to survive. They're going along with the perpetrator's supposed manipulation, supposed demands to save themselves from being really beaten or emotionally or verbally abused further. So definitely I don't excuse the manipulation, but as a therapist, I have to be aware that what they're doing is a learned behavior, and anything that's learned can be unlearned. It just takes a matter of you bringing that to their awareness and being able to tackle how they have learned, and then you replace that manipulative behavior with like more assertive and direct communication. So if it is that they have gotten to survive, or they've gotten, to eat, or to take their children to school, or being able to have a safe space through manipulation and lying, now we have to unravel that. And I need to then basically show them how to not lie. Like, you're now in a safe space. You can now ask and have a sense of choice and have a sense of responsibility that comes with the lying as well. And so you have to be able to bring them on this kind of new track that is about empowering them, giving them a sense of choice, giving them a sense of responsibility, understanding that you don't need to lie anymore. You're safe, and that now if you want something or if you need something, you have to just ask in a respectful and assertive way. And a lot of times my clients, they don't really have a lot of high self-esteem, so sometimes you see them doing things that are like semi-passive aggressive, and I have noted that with my clients, and I have to actively try and bring it to their attention and get them to realize that that behavior is unhealthy and counterproductive to their future. So it's very interesting to see how people who have learned to manipulate, especially as victims, have to now unlearn this behavior. But let me see what people are saying. Lying is lying, rightfully so. If you're in love, then I could understand. I wouldn't even say if you're in love, because people are in love with people all the time and still manipulate. And there's people who, my clients have been in love and they've been battered and abused in numerous ways, more than just physical. And a lot of times they would say emotional abuse has a greater impact long term than physical. Unless you're really battered physically, they say that those emotional and verbal hits have a much more long lasting impact. Encircled, right? Yeah, exactly. Politicians manipulate the masses because we're vulnerable. We want to hear that people are going to be able to help us and solve our problems and do things because they have the power. And that's the thing. People who have power in a relationship, in a government, in a country, in friendships, there is a power dynamic. And so we have to be able to recognize that because someone has power over us, whether it be in an intimate setting or as like in a government level, that doesn't mean that we should give them all the power, and still understand that we have a sense of choice and a sense of responsibility, and that we can be susceptible to manipulation, but how do we put up a boundary for that? I see Lisa saying, kids manipulate their parents all the time. I don't think the level of intelligence determines whether you can be manipulated or not. Exactly. So perfect question, perfect comment, Lisa. I talk about this all the time when I compare like narcissist manipulation and children's manipulation, in the sense of children manipulate us all the time. Children, and I tell people that level of manipulation between like 0 ages and 2, like that is somewhat, I think, normal. They are, if you study development psychology, if you understand the stages children go through before 2 and around 2, they're testing their autonomy. They're going to break rules, they're going to push the boundaries, they're going to see how far they can get away with things without getting shouted at, yelled at, screamed at, beaten. And so children manipulate their parents all the time. Oh, you don't want to give me candy? Okay, I'm going to have a tantrum. Okay, you don't want to carry me to go and see grandma? Okay, I'm going to like throw my teddy bears everywhere. And especially if they can't verbalize, children are very reactive. And that's why if you study psychology, if you know about Freud's the id, ego, and superego, they talk about how we are born with impulses, and very primitive impulses, and children are usually acting on those primitive impulses. So give me food, give me attention, give me love, give me candy, whatever it is that they get hopped up on, and it becomes very primal, this need to get what they want. And children can't always get what they want, so they will manipulate their parents to get it. The only difference is, I tell people, once you still see a child manipulating 4 and 6 and 10 and 15, that is definitely a red flag, because there's a likelihood that this child will never really stop manipulating, because he or she has already recognized, if I do X, I get Y. If I do this, my mom will do that. And especially when you see like parents who have been separated, the children will manipulate both parents to get what they want, because they know they can get away with it. So it becomes very unhealthy when a child is recognizing that they can manipulate. So that's why you always have to have like boundaries with children, and understand how they can, and what is the healthier thing to do with them. To not, like, when you recognize that they're manipulating, you give them choices, you give them punishment, alternate punishment, and really cognitive punishments, because children don't really understand licks. They don't really, like, they're more scared of it rather than understanding why they're getting it. Let me see what is being said here. Okay, Jerry said he did agree, then he said he didn't agree, because parents love their children, okay. And my sons manipulated me, I was victim. And that may have also been a learned behavior. So your kids may have learned that from seeing it somewhere else. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that they will continue to manipulate. But if, for example, Jerry, you have 2 grown children, both in their 30s, and so if you find that your sons are still manipulating you, then definitely that's something to be wary of. And if it is that you recognize they still are manipulating you, then that needs to be a conversation that you have with them, and be like, look, this is very unhealthy. And perhaps then therapy is needed, because they will just keep manipulating other people. They'll manipulate their partners, and their partners will then go on to manipulate other people, because they're learning it from their relationships. So definitely something to be aware of. I don't always agree with parents who love, like, parents love their children, because what I've experienced and what anybody who's worked in, like, child protection, stuff like that, would tell you, not all parents love their children. Not all parents show that they love their children, and not all parents are great at parenting. And so, um, I'm not sure how the because parents love their children get in there, because um, a lot of times manipulation doesn't always happen because parents don't either love you or not. Children just pick it up quite early, and if they're in a manipulative home, they will definitely pick it up as they get a little bit more older and a little bit more cognizant. Um, yeah, so if definitely Auntie Debs is much more intellectual than you, then that's fine, because some persons, like we said early on, are a little bit more vulnerable to manipulation than others, and there's nothing wrong with that. Rightfully so. It comes down to you trusting the people who are trying to manipulate you, and a lot of times once you like recognize and acknowledge it, it's a matter of having a conversation, and or if you're, if you have a therapist, dealing with it in family therapy, because i can I can now have that conversation with my clients and be like, look, I've recognized this and this and this, and you point it out. If you don't point out someone's behavior very particularly, or if you don't point out their manipulation, there's really no growth. You can shout and scream and say, oh, you manipulated me, and you've lied to me, and you've hurt me, and so on, but it really doesn't um, change anything, because they're not really aware. They may be aware, but if you don't point it out, there's a less likelihood that they'll be able to do anything about it. Okay, now I'm just gonna touch on narcissism just a little bit before I go. So narcissism, that is where you see a lot of manipulation. But narcissists, people are like, what is a narcissist exactly? And I always tell people more the signs than anything, because I can give you a textbook a description, but it won't mean anything. Um, the narcissist is a very dangerous person to have interaction with. If you are vulnerable or have a low self esteem, a narcissist can really bury you. Both male and female can be narcissists. It's seen a little bit more prevalent in males, or at least it's more recognized in males. And so the narcissist is someone who tends to seem really quite confident, is out there, is doing their thing, is successful, and speaks properly, and has all the friends and that kind of thing. But if you get into the relationship, if you ever ask someone who's with a narcissist what was the relationship like, a lot of time people say it was hell on earth. Little simple things that you can experience with a narcissist is manipulation. Um, a narcissist is never wrong. It's never their fault. And that stems from their grandeur. So they feel that basically they are the smartest, the most popular, the most accomplished. A really great example of a narcissist in this day and age is Trump. Trump is the perfect candidate for a diagnosis of narcissism. And a lot of times narcissists are overcompensating for some kind of maybe trauma or difficult childhood, that they need to then keep telling themselves they're this amazing person. And the problem with that is that when you date a narcissist, you're the one who has to fuel their grandeur. You have to validate them. You have to keep reminding them how great they are. You are never wrong, and they're always right, so you never get your own kind of like closure, validation, like nothing you do is enough, because it's always your fault. So like you could be like a top chef, and your food is slightly salty, and it's like the worst thing because you can't cook, you know. Um, and everything was their fault. They may have come in the kitchen and done something, but no, 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 no. You are the one cooking the meal. You're the chef. You're supposed to know, but you messed up the plate. And so everything, it's a constant draining of your emotions, draining of your self-esteem. And what they're doing is draining you to fulfill them. And so manipulation is also included in that to further make you feel credible and in control and competent, because their intention is to always be better than you. And you can't have a healthy relationship where you have two persons either vying for the best, best partner of the relationship, and you also can't have a relationship when one person is constantly trying to dominate the other and drain that person of all that they're bringing to the relationship. And a lot of my clients ask, why me? Why do they know? How do they know? And a lot of times, narcissists know how to pick their partners. Abusive people know how to pick their partners because they can sense very early on some level of emotional vulnerability. You might even like just accidentally say in a conversation, oh, like no one's ever told me I'm beautiful, or growing up my mother used to like beat me and she never made me feel loved. Those kinds of persons who manipulate and want to take advantage of you and those kinds of things, that is you giving them all the information. And so they're literally going to be like, oh, I literally just have to tell this girl that she's beautiful every day, tell her that, she's the love of my life, tell her these things, get her on my side, get her trusting me, and then the manipulation starts and the emotional abuse starts. And so that's how, and people ask me all the time, how come he waited like a year to hit me or something like that? And I always tell people, abusers will start slowly, slowly. Sometimes, yes, you get some abusive men who go from like 0 to 100, and they might start abusing physically their partners quite soon after relationship, especially if you like move in very quickly, which, as I mentioned before, is one of the characteristics of abusive people. Quick to involvement. Come, stay the night by me. Come, spend the weekend by me. Come, meet my family after like 2 weeks. Come, let's move in together within a month or so. And they say, so I tell them they're testing you in small ways. They're planting a seed very early on, and we don't know it. Planting a seed can be something as simple as you coming out in a dress, and they know you're a good-looking person, and so instead of being vulnerable and saying, babe, that dress makes me uncomfortable, I don't want people looking at you. They might be straight up and say, I don't want you wearing that. But that's usually later on once they've got you. But early on, when you're still building trust and rapport, they might say something like, oh, babe, that dress it's not the best looking dress on you. I've seen you look so much more beautiful. Like, don't wear that. That's not like the best looking thing for you. Oh, let me help you. I'm a man. I know. And that's what we call, I think it's called like using male privilege. And this is also what abusive people use, and manipulators use as well. Using male privilege. Oh, you don't know about football. I'm a man. I know about football. You know about cooking. You're a woman. Stuff like that. And those are things that that abusers and manipulators are intending to undermine and discredit your self-confidence and discredit your reality and stuff like that, and start to make you question, well, do I know about football? I mean, I grew up with 6 brothers, but that doesn't mean I know anything about football. And so you start to question, and a lot in this questioning, the more they manipulate and the more they isolate and the more they get under your skin, it's easier for them to basically start to play on everything that is you. So that was just my little bit. I don't want to go too long, but let me just look at comments, and if you have questions, you guys know it's that time. Lisa, love is one of the most used factors of manipulation. Yeah, of course. I love you. Don't you love me? Why don't you love me? I've done everything for you, and they use a lot of things against you and stuff like that. So there's multiple layers of manipulation, and if you do feel like some of these things sound like your case, by all means, go and do your research. Go and read articles on manipulation, scholarly uh, articles. Um, Message me, give me your scenario, and I'll hopefully be able to make sense of it. A lot of times I like people to voice note me and stuff like that, because I just get much more of a clearer picture. So definitely, if you guys are having concerns or questions with manipulation, or you feel like you're being manipulated, definitely message me, inbox me, and we'll definitely get to talking more about that. Tisha, so true, looking at vulnerability. Yeah, vulnerability is, it's a hit or miss for a lot of people. A lot of people aren't vulnerable. They put up a wall and that wall never comes down. And there are people who, put up a wall, and then as soon as they feel like someone's remotely giving them love and attention, the wall comes straight down, and that's how they fall prey to things like abuse. And then there are people who never really have up a wall, so they're constantly being battered emotionally and verbally and so on. And so it's just a matter of you knowing who you are, what you stand for, what you don't like, what you will not tolerate. And it doesn't matter if you're vulnerable or not, because you have those key things that are part of who you are, and you can be able to identify that's unhealthy, that doesn't sound right, and once you have the right questions, I always tell my clients, what questions are you guys asking these men before you move in with them, before you sleep with them, before you have a relationship with them? Because certain questions need to be had. Oh, you don't have a relationship with your mom. Why? Because I always tell people, before abusers start abusing you, they've already practiced on other people. They've already practiced on their ex-girlfriends, their mothers, their sisters. And so as soon as you start hearing that they don't have relationships, no friends with, they don't have many friends, or they don't have relationships,